I sit alone in Denver, sipping the California wine.
Well, good afternoon. It's great to see so many Longhorns and friends here for a very special occasion. I am grateful to be part of today and honored to introduce our speaker. There is so much that a student or a lawyer, frankly even a citizen, can learn from Justice Clarence Thomas. He has served on our nation's highest court longer than any current justice and has shaped how we think about the law in ways that will endure for generations. But before I introduce him, I want to invite us to consider something deeper. Because we're not only here to listen to a great jurist, we're here also to learn from someone who has devoted a life to a great experiment. That experiment began 250 years ago, born at our nation's independence, but it's never been self-sustaining. It endures because each generation produces people who seek to understand it, who take it seriously, and who are willing to live it out. Justice Thomas is, in the fullest sense, a great citizen of this republic. His civic life has many important things to teach us, and many of them remind us of ourselves. The first is this: Justice Thomas has always chosen to go his own way. He once wrote about reading Ralph Ellison's book, Invisible Man, and recognized in it a man who spent years going in everyone else's way except his own, and resolved that he would not be that way. He has said simply, "I set out to do my best to be right." Being right demands more than going along with what's easy or expected, but is often the only way to do things that last. The people of Texas founded this university on a similar conviction. Our state constitution calls us to be a university of the first class. Longhorns understand what it means to lead our own path. The second thing in his life teaches us is that freedom is inseparable from responsibility. That bears repeating. Freedom is inseparable from responsibility. Justice Thomas has spoken throughout his life about the difference between what we are owed and what we owe others, about the fact that a free people cannot sustain their freedom without accepting the obligations that come with it. This is the foundation of citizenship. It is why we are here. Whether you're studying law or medicine or physics or humanities, the purpose of your education is not only to develop your own mind. It is also to put your mind in service to others. The President of the Republic of Texas, Mirabel Lamar, who secured the future of this university, set aside public land for public education, has a famous quote you may have heard before. He tells us that the cultivated mind is the guardian genius of democracy. He continues, guided and controlled by virtue, the noblest attribute of man. Justice Thomas lives out that virtue, and he invites us, by his example, to do the same. Now, I'd like to close with a biographical note about Justice Thomas. He did not attend the University of Texas at Austin. But when I look at his life, the path he chose, the convictions he holds, I see the spirit of a Longhorn. In truth, he reflects what we believe, and importantly, who we hope to become. It is now my great honor to introduce Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States, the Honorable Clarence Thomas. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I think I'll quit while I'm ahead. Thank you all very much. President Davis, Provost Inboden, Dean Dyer, faculty, students, and honored guests. I thank each of you for being here, and I thank the school and the officials here for the invitation to visit the University of Texas at Austin. My wife, Virginia, and I are pleased to be here to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. If my memory serves me, this is only my second visit to the University of Texas, and this is the first visit at the invitation of the university. But I have hired and worked with a number of outstanding young people associated with this university. My first was now Chief Judge Greg Maggs of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Armed Services, who was a fairly new faculty member at the law school when I became a member of the court. He took a leave of absence to help me as a law clerk during the second half of my first term. My first UT graduate to serve as a law clerk was Greg Coleman 3 decades ago. Greg went on to become the first solicitor of the state of Texas. He was simply outstanding, as was his son Reed, who also was a graduate of the law school here and who was also equally outstanding. Greg's widow and our very dear friend Stephanie is with us today. Stephanie, thank you, and thanks for being such a good friend. And both Greg and his son Reed clerked for my dear friend Judge Edith Jones, also a graduate of UT Law School. I greatly admire Judge Jones. She is one of my heroes, and I admire her as a person and as a jurist. And I'm grateful that she can be here today. A number of my former clerks are also here. I can't tell you which ones, so let me ask them to stand to be recognized. So in my chambers, UT and UT Law School are very well represented. I hope, I'm having a little trouble with this, getting used to the podium, sorry about that. I hope that my talk today will help in some small way to inaugurate another great initiative, the state of Texas's plan to restore the teaching of civics and Western civilization to a central place in its flagship university. And I am grateful and honored to have been invited by Justin Dyer, the Dean of the new School of Civic Leadership. I'm also grateful for the assistance of my former law clerk, Professor John Yu, who has spent the last 3 decades at Berkeley Law School, but is now joining Justin and his team here at the University of Texas. The school's stated mission is to help students encounter the distinct inheritance of Western civilization and the American constitutional tradition as part of a larger quest for wisdom about how to live and how to lead. Your plans could not come at a more important moment for our nation when, as we celebrate the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, the very values announced in it have fallen out of favor. It is my sincere hope that your work to revitalize the teaching and research of Western civilization and the American constitutional tradition will lead the way in the reform of our nation's colleges and universities. And I hope that your example will help to rejuvenate our fellow citizens' commitment to the principles of the Declaration of Independence. I seem to always enjoy my travels to this amazing state. My wife, Virginia, and I have many wonderful friends and acquaintances here. And it is so special to have our dear friends, Harlan and Kathy Croat, join us today. One of the features of this state that stands out in a way that is the way that Texans talk about it. What comes through is the sustained and sustaining affection that they have for their home state. That reverential feeling for and attachment to Texas is to be respected and admired, and if possible, emulated. This affection is similar to the attachment that I grew to have for my home state of Georgia, and certainly for our country, despite the indelible mark of segregation and its companion evils. I was proud to say that I was American by birth and Georgian by the grace of God. It was not uncommon to hear others openly proclaim their allegiance to God and country. At our grammar school, St. Benedict's, we started each school day by lining up 2 by 2 and class by class in the schoolyard to watch the raising of our flag and to say the Pledge of Allegiance before silently marching to our respective classrooms. Even as so much of our God-given and constitutional rights were denied us, we still faithfully said the Pledge of Allegiance, memorized the preamble to the Constitution, and yearned for the fulfillment of its promised ideals. Sadly, these sentiments are not as widely shared among our fellow citizens today, and they certainly do not seem to have that sustaining strength that they had back then. In fact, all too often, the sentiments tend toward cynicism, rejection, hostility, and animus toward our country and its ideals. With the foregoing in mind, I would like to begin by addressing my first encounter with the principles of the Declaration of Independence. It is perhaps not what you would immediately think. The second paragraph of the Declaration proclaims, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights." Throughout my youth, these truths were articles of faith that were impervious to bigotry and discrimination. The American Heritage Dictionary of English Language defines self-evident as obviously true and requiring no proof, argument, or explanation. Whether they had a divine source or a worldly one, they were never questioned. They were the Holy Grail, the North Star, the rock, immovable and unquestioned. Despite the multiplicity of laws and customs that reeked of bigotry, it was universally believed among those blacks with whom I lived and who had very little or no formal education that, in God's eyes, and under our Constitution, we were equal. This was also the case with my nuns, most of whom were Irish immigrants. At home, at school, and at church, we were taught that we are inherently equal, that equality came from God, and that it could not be diminished by man. We were made in the image and likeness of God. That proposition was not debatable and was beyond the power of man to alter. Others with power and animus could treat us as unequal, but they lacked the divine power to make us so. Somehow, without formal education, the older people knew that these God-given or natural rights preceded and transcended governmental power or authority. When you lived in a segregated world with palpable discrimination, and the governments nearest to you enforced laws and customs that promoted unequal treatment, it was obvious that your rights or your dignity did not come from those governments, but rather from God. Though not a literate man, my grandfather often spoke of our rights and obligations coming from God, not from architects of segregation and discrimination. Men were not angels. They were subject to the constraints of antecedent rights, and we were not subject to those men, even as we were subjected to their whims. We knew that life, liberty, and property were sacrosanct. Those truths were self-evident to the adults in our lives and were taught to us as indelible, undeniable truths. Those around us would endure or could endure the insults of segregation with dignity because they knew that in God's eyes they were equal. All too often, there is an unfortunate tendency when discussing the Declaration to make these self-evident truths and first principles of government obscure. Intellectuals want you to believe that our founding principles are matters of esoteric philosophy or sophisticated debate. Even those who support them too often talk about them as if they were academic playthings. They overcomplicate them, take the spirit out of them, and discuss them in a way that puts us to sleep. But the principles of the Declaration of Independence, as I encountered them, are a way of life. They are not an abstract theory that you only learn in college or law school, but the basic premises of our Constitution and government that you can learn from the people all around you. When Alexis de Tocqueville visited early America from France, he was struck that there was no country in the civilized world where they were less occupied with philosophy than the United States. But there was likewise no country where the principles of the Declaration were more deeply ingrained or more fiercely defended than those same United States. That is the sense in which I knew the principles of the Declaration in my childhood. That is the only sense in which those principles can sustain our country. And that is the sense in which I will speak to you about those principles today. I believe now, let me change these. I believe now, as I did then, that the Declaration of 1776 provides us with the principles to guide us as citizens of our republic. Even in this time of questioning and criticism of our founding, We should not forget that the Declaration established the principles that produced, despite all of our imperfections, our miscues, and our tragic mistakes. It gave us the freest, wealthiest, and most powerful nation in the history of the world. It provided the moral principles by which Frederick Douglass, Abraham Lincoln, and Martin Luther King would criticize the institutions of slavery and segregation. The Declaration, in fact, along with the Gospels, the Declaration is, in fact, along with the Gospels, one of the greatest anti-slavery documents in the history of Western civilization. It did not establish a form of government. That was the work of the Constitution that followed, but it stated the purpose of government. The Declaration made it clear, in clear prose, that the purpose of government is to protect our God-given unalienable rights, rights that all individuals equally possess. As Abraham Lincoln declared in 1858 in the midst of his great debates with Stephen Douglas, quote, "Drop every paltry, insignificant thought for any man's success. It is nothing. I am nothing. Judge Douglas is nothing. But do not destroy that immortal emblem of humanity, the Declaration of American Independence." The ideas of the Declaration are so powerful that our nation could not coexist with the contradiction created by the great evil of slavery. Those principles were so powerful that hundreds of thousands of Americans fought and died in the Civil War to make men free. Those ideas have been so powerful that they convinced our nation to finally end segregation. They continue to be so powerful today that they have inspired people throughout the world to throw off the shackles of their own oppressors. And it all began with our founders declaring in 1776 in the Declaration of Independence that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We should also not forget the important sentence that follows, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted. The principle of consent follows from the principle of equality. We, the people, can never legitimately consent to the violation of our God-given equality. However, when I encounter the Declaration of Independence anew today, I am most struck by the final sentence. It can be easy to forget, 250 years later, the courage it took for those 56 men to sign the Declaration. Arguably, those men committed treason against the king, risking death at the hands of an empire far mightier than the newborn United States. They thus concluded with the memorable final sentence, and I quote, "And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor." I will say it again. We mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Recently, I came across a definition of courage that is attributed to President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And courage is not the absence of fear, but rather the assessment that Something else is more important than fear. In essence, the signers of the Declaration were saying that they were willing to die for the principles they were asserting, the supreme act of courage. Those principles were more important than their fear. Nothing in the Declaration of Independence, I now realize, matters without that final sentence. Without that sentence, the rest of the Declaration is but mere words on parchment paper. Nice words, but nonetheless, just words. What changed the world was not the words, but the commitment and spirit of the people who were willing to labor, sacrifice, and even give their lives, what Lincoln at Gettysburg called the last full measure of devotion for the Declaration's principles. It is that devotion, it is that devotion to which we owe our rich inheritance. It was that devotion that sustained the Founding Fathers and the Continental Army as they fought and won the Revolutionary War, braved the winter at Valley Forge, crossed the Delaware, and defeated an army, many times their number and firepower, to win their freedom. It was that devotion that Nathan Hale expressed when, before being executed by the British, he reportedly said, "I only regret that I have but one life to give for this country." It was that devotion that Patrick Henry invoked when he stood before the Virginia Convention and asked, "Is life so dear or peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others may take, but for me, give me liberty or give me death." That devotion has driven the great achievements and heroism of Americans in the 250 years since. Think of the frontiersmen who settled the West. Think of the families who built their little towns on the prairies. Think of the women who raised their children to love God and country and sent them off to fight wars. Think of the soldiers on the battlefields of the Civil War who sang, "As he died to make men holy, let us die to make men free." Think of the innovators and laborers and engineers who, Tocqueville observed, were so infused with the patriotism that they felt every triumph for their country as a triumph in their personal lives. Think of how the devotion carried us from Independence Hall to Flanders Field and to the beaches of Normandy. Think of the memorable scene in the Band of Brothers when the American soldiers arrived at a concentration camp, saw the suffering, emaciated, desperate prisoners, unlocked the gates, and gave them food and blankets and warm embraces. The soldiers looked around and knew in their hearts that this is why we fight. Think of the passengers of Flight 93 that crashed in Shanksville, Pennsylvania on 9/11, or the young men and women whom we send in harm's way, even as we sit here today. Think of my grandparents who heroically, quietly, without fanfare, sat my brother and me down at the kitchen table in August of 1955 and committed the rest of their lives to us so that we could have a chance. They told us, "We don't have no education. We don't have no education and no chance, but you boys are going to have a chance. But we're going to devote the rest of our lives to you boys." It was their devotion, their love, their dedication to raising us right that has made the difference, not the words, though the words expressed as best they could what they intended to do. Their devotion is what mattered. Similarly, it is the devotion expressed in the final sentence of the Declaration, the willingness to do anything for our principles that has throughout American history been most indispensable. It is that devotion that we are missing today and that we must find in our hearts if this nation is to endure. I arrived in Washington, D.C. 47 years ago. It's hard to believe. I arrived as a staffer for Senator Jack Danforth of Missouri in 1979, telling myself that the job on Capitol Hill would be a short stop on my way home to Savannah, Georgia. I then joined the executive branch during the Reagan administration, served in 2 federal agencies for nearly a decade, served as a judge on the Federal Court of Appeals, and have for the past 34 years served on the Supreme Court. Since the day I arrived in Washington, there was never a shortage of people espousing noble purposes, saying all the right things. All around me, there have been people full of promises, claiming a commitment to some righteous cause, to traditional morality, to national defense, to free enterprise, to religious piety, or to the original meaning of the Constitution. These people can be just as high-minded as the men who signed the Declaration. They can mouth the words of the Declaration and parrot its principles. They can write essays and talk at conferences about the Declaration with the best of them. All too often, however, this was but lip service, camouflaged by grand theories in the tall grass of big words and eloquent phrases. What seemed to be lacking, however, was that devotion. People gain positions of authority, and you learn who they really are. To paraphrase something I recently read, combat strips us down to our essentials. Once in the spotlight, in that combat, many people fall prey to the lures that are set up to turn them away from their previously untested principles. They become petrified by criticisms, so fearful of negative attention that they find ways to avoid doing the right thing. Or they fall prey to the enchanting siren songs of flattery and become so bewitched by praise that they will desperately seek to conform accordingly. They are enticed by access to things that were previously unavailable to them. They get so swept up in the euphoria of acclamation and acceptance that they put aside their convictions. They water down their message, negotiate against themselves, vote against their principles, and hide in the tall grass. They recast themselves as institutionalists, pragmatists, or thoughtful moderates, all as a way of justifying their failures to themselves, their consciences, and their country. It did not take me long in Washington to stop wondering why the Supreme Court took 60 years to overrule Plessy versus Ferguson, the 1896 decision that endorsed government-enforced racial segregation and validated the Jim Crow South that I grew up in. It could not possibly have taken my court 60 years to know that Plessy was a hideous wrong and that racial discrimination was grossly incompatible with our colorblind Constitution. The justices must have known it all along. The right thing to do, as Justice Harlan spelled out in his lone dissent, was obvious, as it so often is. Perhaps what stood in the way was cowardice. The justices may have been afraid of the societal consequences. They may have been afraid of coming under political fire. They may have been afraid of losing their social standing. They may have been afraid of bad press. They could have been concerned that if they began to enforce a colorblind Constitution, They would have to address interracial marriage next. But in any case, for 60 disgraceful years, they made American children like me grow up in a racial caste system because it was easier to do nothing than to do the right thing. When Americans look to Washington and wonder why it is so often disappoints, it is not because there are too few people who know what is right. It is not because we lack the intellect or the capacity or the talent. It is instead because there are too few people who are willing to do what it takes to do the right thing, to sacrifice the popularity, flattery, comfort, and security that are the purchase price for principle. It is because too few of us reflect on and reflect the courage and commitment of that final sentence of the Declaration. And so many seem to have forgotten how much others have sacrificed so that this nation could exist and endure. I will state this more poignantly. Do any of us have what it took for our young soldiers to storm Normandy Beach, to fight at Guadalcanal, to later fight at Chosin Reservoir? If we can't say that we have the courage required of these young soldiers in battle to defend our founding principles, then how do we preserve these principles and this republic? Until we have a devotion that matches the courage of those who made this country possible, I seriously doubt any amount of study or development of insights about our Constitution will make much difference. There's a world of difference between what it takes to score academic points and what it takes to protect and defend the Constitution as we are sworn to do. I have faced this struggle myself. About 43 years ago, in the early spring of 1983, I was the lowest point in my life. I had just buried both of my grandparents, the man and woman who raised me, and the two greatest people that I have ever known. I was broke. I was living in and nearly evicted from a cockroach-infested apartment. I could not pay my credit card bills on time. I would soon sell my car to pay my son's tuition. I was being constantly attacked by the media and Congress because, as chairman of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, I did not bow to the then prevailing orthodoxy on race. At that point, I asked myself a simple question: what are the principles worth? What are your principles worth to you? My answer then was the same I would give today. They are worth life itself. What are those principles? They are the same principles in the Declaration. They were bequeathed to me by my grandparents and reinforced by my nuns and my faith. In God's eyes, we are equal. We are all equally created in the image and likeness of God. We are all endowed with the natural rights to life, liberty, and happiness. Our rights and our dignity are inherent. They do not come from others, and they do not come from the government. And our government derives its legitimacy and its authority from our consent. We do not derive our rights from our government. The primacy of our rights in relation to our government is crucial in reconciling the immortal words of the Declaration with our Constitution and our history. None of our rights come from the government. All of the government's authority comes from our consent. And the structure and limited role of government is to assure that it does not exceed the authority to which we have consented or intrude on our natural rights. The Constitution is the means of government. It is the declaration that announces the ends of government. The Constitution achieves this purpose by protecting our natural rights and our liberties from concentrated power and excessive democracy. Our Constitution creates a separation of powers and federalism, truly for the first time in modern history, to prevent the government from becoming so strong that it threatens our natural rights. Federalist number 10 proposed the idea that the great threat to our rights come from the majority faction. Human history teaches us, alas, that numerical majorities frequently seek to control government and use the state to violate rights of the minority. Because man is fallen, and the desire for power was, as James Madison described it, sown in the nature of man, government had to be limited. For as Madison also said, if men were angels, no government would be necessary. If angels were to govern men, neither external nor internal controls on government would be necessary. But, alas, men are not angels. The slaveholders used the power of government to deny the fundamental rights, natural rights of the slaves. The segregationists used the state to oppress the freed men and women, including my ancestors. As we meet today, it is unclear whether these principles will endure. At the beginning of the 20th century, a new set of first principles of government was introduced into the American mainstream. The proponents of this new set of first principles, most prominent among them, the 28th President of our country, Woodrow Wilson, called it progressivism. Since Wilson's presidency, progressivism has made many inroads into our system of government and our way of life. It has coexisted uneasily with the principles of the Declaration. Because it is opposed to those principles, it is not possible for the two to coexist forever. Progressivism was not native to America. Wilson and the progressives candidly admitted that they took it from Otto von Bismarck's Germany, whose state-centric society they admired. Progressives like Wilson argued that America needed to leave behind the principles of the founding and catch up with the more advanced and sophisticated system of relatively unimpeded state power, nearly perfected. He acknowledged that it was a foreign science, speaking very little of the language of English or American principle, which offers none but what are, to our minds, alien ideas. He thus described America, still stuck with its original system of government, as, quote, slow to see the superiority of the European system. Progressivism was the first mainstream American political movement, with the possible exception of the pro-slavery reactionaries on the eve of the Civil War, to openly oppose the principles of the Declaration. Progressives strove to undo the Declaration's commitment to equality and natural rights, both of which they denied were self-evident. To Wilson, the unalienable rights of the individual were, quote, a lot of nonsense. Wilson redefined liberty not as a natural right antecedent to the government, but as, quote, the right of those who are governed to adjust government to their own needs and interests. In other words, liberty no longer preceded the government as a gift from God, but was to be enjoyed at the grace of the government. The government, as Wilson reconceived it, would be, quote, beneficent and indispensable. Progressives such as John Dewey attacked the framers for believing that their ideas were immutable truth, good for all times and places, when instead they were, according to him, historically conditioned and relevant only in their own time. Now Dewey and the progressives argued those ideas are to be displaced. Progressivism seeks to replace the basic premises of the Declaration of Independence, and hence our form of government. It holds that our rights and our dignities come not from God, but from government. It requires of the people a subservience and weakness incompatible with a constitution premised on the transcendent origin of our rights. You will not be surprised to learn that the progressives had a great deal of contempt for us, the American people. Before he entered politics, Wilson would describe the American people as, quote, selfish, ignorant, timid, stubborn, and foolish. He lamented that we do too much by vote and too little by expert rule. He proposed that the people be ruled by administrators who use them as tools. He once again aspired to be like Germany, where the people, he said admiringly, were docile and acquiescent. The century of progressivism did not go well. The European system that Wilson and the progressives scolded Americans for not adopting, which he called nearly perfect, led to the governments that caused the most awful century that the world has ever seen. Stalin, Hitler, Mussolini, and Mao all were intertwined with the rise of progressivism, and all were opposed to the natural rights on which our Declaration are based. Many progressives expressed admiration for each of them shortly before their governments killed tens of millions of people. It was a terrible mistake to adopt progressivism's rejection of the Declaration's vision of universal, unalienable natural rights. Wilson's claim that natural rights must give way to historical progress could justify the greatest mistake in our history. In Plessy versus Ferguson, my court upheld Louisiana's system of racial segregation because, quote, separate but equal, it observed, was reasonable in light of the established usages, customs, and traditions of the people, and with a view to the promotion of their comfort and the preservation of the public peace and good order. It comes as no surprise that the progressives embraced eugenics. Progressives believed that Darwinian science, the idea of ever-advancing progress written into biology itself, had proven the inherent superiority and inferiority of the races. It was only a small step for Wilson to resegregate the federal workforce. It was only another step for the government to launch sterilization programs on those deemed by the experts of the day to be unfit to reproduce, upheld by my court in Buck v. Bell in an opinion written by no less a figure than Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes. We can argue over whether you believe in immutable, absolute natural rights or the Wilsonian idea of ever-progressing history. Indeed, your School of Civic Leadership was created to host just such arguments. But let me ask you to consider the consequences. European thinkers have long criticized America for remaining trapped in a Lockean world with its weak, decentralized government and strong individual rights. They say our 18th century declaration has prevented us from progressing to higher forms of government. But we were fortunate not to trade our Lockean bonds for the supposedly enlightened world of Hegel, Marx, and their followers. Fascism, which after all was National Socialism, triggered wars in Europe and Asia that killed tens of millions. The socialism of the Soviet Union and the People's Republic of China proceeded to kill more tens of millions of their own people. This is what happens when natural rights give way to the higher good of notions of history, progress, or, as Thomas Sowell has written, the visions of the anointed. None of this, of course, was an improvement on the principles of the Declaration. Tocqueville's Democracy in America is largely about how America owed its superiority over Europe to its conscious decision to reject central planning and administrative rule, root and branch. Progressivism, in other words, is retrogressive. As Calvin Coolidge said on the 150th anniversary of the Declaration, and I quote, "If all men are created equal, that is final. If they are endowed with inalienable rights, that is final. If governments derive their just powers from the consent of the government, that is final. No advance, no progress can be made beyond these propositions. If anyone wishes to deny their truth or their soundness, the only direction in which they can proceed historically is not forward, but backward, toward the time when there was no equality, no rights of the individuals, no rule of the people." When Abraham Lincoln addressed the assembled crowd at Gettysburg, they had gathered to memorialize the past, but Lincoln's address urged them to not do so with complacency. Instead, Lincoln said they should look to the past as inspiration to take them to greater heights in the future. And I quote, "It is rather for us to be here, dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead, we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion, that we were highly resolved that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation shall have a new birth of freedom, and that this government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from the earth." As we are gathered to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the Declaration, it may be tempting to do so as if we are passive spectators. It may be tempting to enjoy our tea and crumpets, treat the Declaration like a shiny object or a keepsake, and listen to the sound of our own voices. We could get into debates over whose conception of the founding is better, over how we are so much better than our founders were, over what we would do differently. We could be careful to not do anything that exposes us to criticism, costs us friends, or hurts our career prospects. But in my view, we must find in ourselves that same level of courage that the signers of the Declaration had, so that we can do for our future what they did for theirs. Each of you will have opportunities to be courageous every day. Whether your calling in life as a day laborer, a stay-at-home mom, a small business owner, an educator, an office worker, a judge, or some other endeavor. It may mean speaking up in class tomorrow when someone around you expects you to live by lies. It may mean confronting today's fashionable bigotries, such as anti-Semitism. It may mean standing up for your religion when it is mocked and disparaged by a professor. It may mean not budging on your principles when it will entail losing friends or being ostracized. It may mean running for your school board when you see that they are teaching your children to hate your values and our country. It may mean turning down a job offer that requires you to make moral or ethical compromises. One thing I do know to be true. It will mean waking up every day with the resolve to withstand unfair criticism and attacks. These are the choices that will confront you, and you must decide whether to respond with timidity or with courage, as the signers of the Declaration did. It will, of course, not be easy. It never is. But if, like me, you need a greater source of strength than yourselves, you will need to rely on your faith to guide and to sustain you through it all. You will disappoint people you thought were friends and endure personal attacks, as well as attacks on those you care about. But if you stand, you will find that courage, like cowardice, can be habit-forming, and it will become a part of your life and a part of who you are. And I may dare say it is liberating. You will also be a living example for others to emulate. So by all means, celebrate the Declaration of Independence. It is the most important act of American history, the foundation of our Constitution, and as Lincoln said, the sheet anchor of our republic. But I implore you to celebrate it by standing up for it, by defending it, and by recommitting yourselves to living up to its ideals. Channel the courage of the men who faced down a king and signed it, or a president who led the nation in a civil war, rather than permit this House to be divided by the great contradiction of slavery. Take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure, and with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, let us mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Thank you, and may God continue to bless our country. Sorry to go on so long.
No, we are so grateful that you came to our university to deliver this fantastic address. It's meaningful and important. We are honored by your presence. And so we brought you a present to remember the Longhorn family as well. This is your jersey and your invitation to come back to our campus every day. Thank you, sir, very much.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Hold on, watch this. Your name's on the back. Well, you got to wear it sometime.
Can I get those 3 seconds back?
Oh, he wants the 3 seconds back. Well, I'll give you 3 seconds to sit down. We have Will and Bowden coming up as well to continue a conversation. I'll hold that for you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll take all this, of course. Thank you all very much. Will and Bowden, our provost.
Well, thank you very much, Your Honor. That was a stirring address. It gave us a lot to think about and to reflect on. Hope it wasn't too painful for you as a Nebraska fan to be given that jersey there at the end. So anyway, but you're in friendly.
Well, I offered it up.
Okay. For the final part of our program today, a number of our wonderful students here at the University of Texas, undergraduates and graduates, have submitted a number of questions that Justice Thomas has graciously agreed to address. So I'll read the name of the student, the school they're in, and then the question. And some of these are going to be softballs, and others are going to be for the final exam. So, all right. So anyway. All right, the first one comes from Austin Boyles of our law school. What is your favorite opinion you've ever written?
I have no idea. You know, I don't keep, honestly, I don't want to be glib, but one of the things I decided early on is never to keep score, never to keep trophies. I don't count the number of opinions. I don't count the number of years I'm on the court or anything like that. I think you just do your job. You get up every day, you do it, and you leave it there. And I think that the most dangerous opinions are the ones that people seem to have the least interest in. And just remember, Plessy was not considered an important opinion. You won't find any contemporaneous law review articles or anything on it. And look at the damage that it's done. And any judge can tell you that any number of unimportant opinions sit there in our reports like a loaded gun, and somebody finds it and they use it on something really important. So I don't know how many opinions I've written, but if I were forced to choose opinions, the category I would choose would be the ones that nobody's interested in, like Ford Motor Credit or something like that. The time value of money. You can't do much damage with that.
Our next question comes from Ella Foll with the School of Nursing here at UT. And this will be asking you to elaborate on some themes that you already addressed in your speech there. What experiences in your early life most shaped your judicial philosophy, and how do they continue to influence your decisions today?
You know, I've thought about this because people like to think that it's some high-minded thing. It's actually working with my grandfather. If you plow, everything mattered. He would say, send me on the tractor with water and fuel, and to go back to a remote field, and he said, that road better be straight, or he'd make you do it over. And so you get everything that, and you can apply the exact same things to opinions. And I think the other thing is to start by knowing that you don't have all the answers. He never really said that he had all the answers. There are so many people who have answers. Judges have answers. Local, I was one of the guys working on old buses. He said, "Oh, your rear pinion seal is leaking." Oh, well, rear pinion seal. But just the whole idea of dealing with that, of thinking through that, he's so careful that this is important. Well, I think that way about opinions. If it's worth it to our country, it's worth doing it right. Every little thing. You skip steps, you cause problems. You make a mistake. You've got to, we owe it to these people, to this country, to get these things right. So, you know, I think my grandfather, because he said a job worth doing is worth doing right, and he would hold your feet to the fire. If you are around poor people, if you say, there are little things that if you don't tell the truth about it, it costs you everything. You don't close up the chicken coop, you don't have chickens. You don't close the gate, your cow gets out, the cow's dead. Your hogs get out. Every little thing can be the end of you for that year. You don't plant corn right. You don't fertilize the corn. You don't plow it right. You destroy your food for the winter. And that's the way I try to do the job of the people, the way I would do it for my grandfather. Honestly, thoroughly, and according to the proper processes. Our
next question comes from Aidan Bowman with our School of Civic Leadership. How do you respond to critics who argue that originalism may limit the court's ability to address modern issues that the framers could not have anticipated, such as digital privacy or emerging technologies?
Oh, I think there's actually a pretty good opinion by the Chief. I didn't agree with him completely, but he applies the Fourth Amendment to cell phones. And we had a precedent that basically allowed policemen, when they arrested bookies, to search them and things for their own safety, and they might find a note or something in their pocket. And the note may have information on it, and the question was whether or not that would violate the Fourth Amendment. And of course, our precedent said no. And the issue became whether when you did the exact same thing to someone today and you found the cell phone, is the cell phone like the note or like your file cabinet at home? And so you look at it that way, and he concluded, and I tended to agree with him, it's more like the file cabinet at home. And so the Fourth Amendment would prevent the police officer without a warrant from searching that. I don't think we've had much of a problem in applying it. I think there are some things around on the horizon that we're going to have some challenges with, like AI. I don't even know what that is, and I'm going to have to learn. I think there are some things about privacy that should have been addressed with legislation that we have not, within the intellectual property issues, the First Amendment issues, some of the Fourth Amendment issues, or some of the sort of unfair copying issues, defamation issues, et cetera, that we have not addressed. And I don't know if the court's in a proper place to do it, and I don't know if the law's properly drafted to allow us to do it. But I do not buy this notion that the Constitution cannot address modern problems. That's the bottom line. I think we have shown a capacity to do it, and it may not be able to address them all, but I think the issues that we are concerned about, like Fourth Amendment issues, some of the First Amendment, I think we're in a good position to do that. But I also think that there are some things that can be addressed statutorily that haven't been addressed.
Thanks. Our next question comes from Ethan Thompson, who is a dual degree student in our Moody College of Communication and our College of Liberal Arts. And Ethan asked this: has there ever been a ruling you gave that you personally disagreed with, but you disregarded your personal disagreement because you believed it was required or upheld by the Constitution?
I think if you ask most judges, we operate within the sphere of our authority. And as federal judges, of course, that's Article 3. And we do not draft the laws. We may not like them. We may not, as a policy matter, and if we were legislators, we might not even vote for them. But we take what is given and we apply that. It doesn't mean you do it with glee. I don't think any judge does hard work. It's really, look at my pictures when I first arrived at the court and look what it's done to me. There isn't a single judge I know who does hard things because they get joy out of it. They do hard things because they signed up to do hard things. And they may not agree with it, and it may be difficult. They may think it's not a great law, but their job as Article 3 judges is to enforce the law, to interpret it and to apply it to that particular case. When I first became a judge, Judge Larry Silverman, who's unfortunately passed away, said, ask yourself before each case, what is my role in this case as a judge? Notice how that limits you, not as a person, not as a Catholic, not as a policymaker, not as a husband, as a judge. And that is early on, that required more discipline. We had the Haitian refugee cases, and that's when they were sending the Haitians, diverting them, first President Bush and then President Clinton, to Guantanamo Bay, which was a military base. Most people think it's some kind of a camp now, but it was a military base then. And they were diverting there for certain constitutional reasons, not bringing them to our country. I, in my heart, bled for the Haitians. It broke my heart. And I remember speaking with I was brand new. I spoke with Chief Justice Rehnquist, and he said, "You have to do your job." And he was really good about it. I said, "This is really hard," but it was that moment where you learn this is what the limit is on my authority. This is my role, and I have to accept it. But that was early on a very, very difficult case. I don't think anyone could look at people in those circumstances and as a human being not feel badly about it. But our job is to, as a clerk said about one of my colleagues, that he should man up. Our job is to man up and do our jobs.
I won't ask who that clerk was.
I'm not.
Okay, all right, okay. I'd say it's off the record, but there's 1,000 people.
Oh, no, nothing's off the record.
We'll talk afterwards. All right,
No,
okay.
You lose control of it as soon as you utter it.
Yeah, okay. All right. Shane David Willett from the School of Civic Leadership asked this: if you could recenter the study of constitutional law, what aspect of American constitutionalism do you think is both foundational yet strangely under-discussed?
Oh, I think the ratification, the founding, I think what our framers really meant by the Declaration. I think that, when I was in law school, we didn't even read the Constitution when I took constitutional law. We did not certainly read the founding. We did not read. Pauline Maier has this wonderful book on ratification. I mean, it is one of the things that I have found being in this job and what we owe to our fellow citizens is to educate ourselves about history. I just think we owe it. It's like the football players have off-season, they have conditioning and all those things. I think we have to do the exact same thing. We have to be prepared. We have to read about Reconstruction, on and on and on. It isn't just about looking at the words. It's about looking at everything that was around it. I remember when we were working on my separate writing in the McDonald gun case, and people were saying things like the framers never thought of broadly about the right to bear arms, and especially with respect to the newly freed men. Well, you can go read Eric Foner, and you don't have to agree with him politically, but you read his book on Reconstruction. You can read others on Reconstruction. They were concerned when they drafted the 14th Amendment, what was happening to the freedmen in the South after Reconstruction, and it was awful. You had the Knights of Camellia, you had the Ku Klux Klan, and sure, they thought they had a right to protect themselves. But you had this oft-repeated mantra that, of course, that this right did not apply. And you can go and dig through the history, and there it is. These people have a right to defend themselves. They have a natural right to self-defense over and over and over. And that's why the McDonald, but I think it's the history. You owe it to people to do the off-season work, to do the conditioning, to read, not just opinions, everything, and to be prepared for these hard cases. And I think people underestimate the amount of work many judges do to be prepared for the hard issues. It's not just the cases. They teach to expand themselves, to look at things a different way. You talk about, and the ones I know are so committed to doing that. So if it were up for me, I would say the context of these provisions, the history around these provisions, the people who were involved as much as you possibly can, their biographies, et cetera, from different perspectives, until you have a sense of what you're working with and not just the words on a piece of paper.
Our next question comes from Ryan Karkowski, who is a dual degree student with our Macomb School of Business and our College of Liberal Arts. He says, and this is more on a personal angle, you've spoken often about the warmth and friendship among the Supreme Court justices despite deep ideological divides. What is the most important factor in maintaining that culture in such a time of polarization?
Oh, I don't know. I would go back. I mean, when I said a lot of that, it was when I first went to the court, and that was a different court. That was a court that was a World War II generation. There are people on that court like Sandra Day O'Connor, who I think gets way too little credit for what she did. These were people who they were more in that tradition of a civil society, et cetera, and who would listen to different points of views. I think this generation of kids they're in a different world. They're in a world in which I think Marcuse and the people who advocated intolerance 30, 40 years ago would be happy with this intolerant view that your enemy, that the people who disagree with you are your enemies. I think that that questioner should ask themselves and the young people here, how do you do it? How do you deal with different opinions in this university? How do you deal with it in your dorm? How do you deal with it at the coffee shop? And when I went to college, you could debate endlessly. We called them rap session all night. And you'd go at it, and you were friends, and you loved, and you would pick it up years later and continue that debate. Mm-hmm. But you were buddies. That's the way guys, that's what we did. It's like me ribbing the president over that 3 seconds you all stole from us in the championship game, Big 12 championship game. And I'm not holding it. I mean, I don't...
Let's talk about revisionist history for a second there. Okay, all right, okay.
Did you or did you not add 3 seconds?
We only needed 1 second and 3 points.
I know.
Okay, all right, so, that's right. Okay.
But I think they do, seriously. I think that young person should ask yourself while you're in college, how do you all deal with differences? Because I joined the court that dealt with differences as friends, as we respected each other. And I don't know how, that civility, I don't know how you bring it back in the current environment with social media and name calling and people accusing each other of various things and animus. I don't know how you do that. And I fear that that's going to infect the institutions such as the court and judges, et cetera, in the future, because these are the young people who will be in these jobs.
Our next question is one that I know you've got some views and a track record on. We talked about this earlier today, so I'm especially excited to ask this one. It comes from Edwin Ling with our College of Natural Sciences. For those who don't or haven't attended an Ivy League for law school but are interested in being a Supreme Court justice or clerk, what would their path look like? Is there any significance in having an Ivy law degree on the Supreme Court? And do you see that trend shifting in the future?
Well, I think it's really what we have allowed is for certain law schools to dominate the court. Mm-hmm. Both the law clerks and the members of the court. 4 of us on the court now went to Yale Law School, 4 went to Harvard Law School. And last I checked, those were not the only 2 law schools in the nation. 1 went to Notre Dame. Yeah. And I have been harping on this since the day I got there. This is wrong. That was also reflected in the law clerks, that many of the law clerks went to certain schools. Now, we have changed that. I think smart kids can be found virtually anywhere. I had one of my clerks recently, who's now a federal judge, went to Covenant College. I had never heard of Covenant College. Mm-hmm. And then she went on to University of Florida Law School. But I think, and as I said, starting here, I had clerks out of the University of Texas. I mean, these are wonderful, wonderful kids. They're smart. Mm-hmm. They're normal. They don't feel like they're the noblesse oblige. I've even had clerks who went to Texas A&M.
Oh, okay.
Now, you have to be more broad-minded than that.
Yeah. Right. No one's perfect. Okay.
But I don't think it makes any sense for us to be the preserve of the Ivy Leagues. I've been very consistent about that. I think that people talk about diversity on the court. You talk about a lack of diversity. Mm-hmm. One of the things we have been able to do and that I feel good about is when I first got the 11th Circuit, which is the eastern part of the South, Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. It was rare that you had law clerks from that circuit, and we were able to. There was one year, I think there were 10 or 11 clerks at the court from the 11th Circuit. We have clerks from the 5th Circuit. We're beginning to get kids from all over, and I think you're going to see that in the future feed in the judicial appointments. And I really respect the judges who have broken that mold and helped to break that mold, and who aren't enamored of these one or two schools that judges seem to be locked in with in the past.
So. Next question comes from George Grayson Slover, who is another dual degree student at our law school and at our LBJ School of Public Affairs. And he asks, how do we dispel the fatalistic view that the judicial branch has become just as political as the other branches?
Well, I mean, that's, those get pretty old. I think that we have reached a point where the people who comment on judging and on courts have become more like political commentators. When I arrived at the court, there were people who actually read the opinion and commented on the opinions, and would explain as you go back to the 1950s, for example, or the 40s, and you read the New York Times on, say, Wickard and Filburn. It's beautifully written. It's concise and it's straightforward and it's actually correct. And it raised points for the future. Now it's like a drama. And I was kidding about the University of Nebraska game. Actually, I wasn't. But I want you to just put it in this context. That you and I, if we're watching a football game, say you all are playing Alabama, and the referee makes a call that costs you the game, as a fan, what's your reaction to that referee?
Pretty mad.
Yeah, and you base it totally on the call he made because you wanted a particular outcome. Okay, now let's change it. Let's say that referee makes the exact same call, but it's against Alabama. What do you think of that referee?
Justice.
Yeah. That is exactly what is happening now to the judiciary. When they like an outcome, you're great. When they don't like an outcome, you're horrible. You're political. You're going out. And I don't think that's good for your country. That goes back to the point about civility. They're not commenting as people who are commenting on law. They're commenting almost as fans. It's all outcome determinative, or the outcome determines the analysis. It backwashes into what they think of the judging. Now, I'm not going to make any comment about judges themselves. We may disagree about what certain judges are doing, but my point is it's not helpful that the commentary makes it seem that way or exacerbates that.
Our next question comes from Althea Honan with our College of Education, and she asks, given the rapid evolution of technology and societal norms, is there a specific case from earlier in your tenure where your perspective on the underlying legal doctrine has shifted since your opinion was issued?
Actually, if you go back, last year I was the only one on the court who was there for virtually all of the development of the internet. And I know that's, but I did not invent it. I don't want that set up. And it's interesting. I was there for the development of that, for the development of cell phones. We had car phones back then. And so what has happened, if you look at the early indecency cases that we had with Playboy and some of the others, and the cable cases, you'll see that the jurisprudence, having been there through all of that, you come out one way in the early cases, and you say that, well, the censorship violated the First Amendment because it wasn't nuanced. You could not censor it in sort of a targeted way. But then recently I wrote an opinion where I said the opposite of what we said then, because the technology is now so good that you can do that. Does that make you?
Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
technology changed the analysis because you're dealing with something that is fundamentally different or categorically different from what we were dealing with in the early years.
All right, here's another kind of technical one from Aidan Ross with the law school. Tensions between originalism and textualism have been well discussed by legal scholars. In your jurisprudence, how do you square the text, the original public meaning of the Constitution, with common law and founding era sources that clearly indicate an outcome removed from the text?
I don't think I've run into that problem. And honestly, I don't know. I know it's a good question, but I don't understand what the roots of it is, because when you do originalism, you look at the tradition, you look at the context, you look at the history around it, and that part of that is common law. So I really don't know where that conflict is, and I can't tell you I read those articles. I'm really busy. I've not run into. I just don't know I don't know what they're talking about. I wish I did, but I don't.
Okay.
I've not had that problem.
Marlo Polma with our School of Civic Leadership asks, how much did Justice Scalia impact your judicial philosophy?
Very little. I mean, he and I were quite different. And we were both surprised that we would wind up the same place. We rarely, if ever, discuss cases. He was out killing unarmed animals a lot. I could not get into that. Why would you walk into the woods where there are rattlesnakes and moccasins and stuff to kill something you can get at the supermarket? And we would have this discussion. He'd go out in the woods, you know. But no, he and I were different. But we, again, I would say in the years that we were together, there may have been no more than a half dozen cases that we talked about before we went to conference. It's just we arrived at the same conclusions in different ways. If you want to see, I thought one of my favorite back and forth with him was in the anonymous speech case, McIntyre, because he said that the contemporaneous views about anonymous and pseudonymous speech being protected speech, there was not enough contemporaneously or in literature to show that it was protected. And so he used subsequent history. And we disagreed. I thought it was a wonderful back and forth, absolutely wonderful. But we rarely talked. He wasn't around as much, and he worked in the evenings. But I think he didn't have that great an influence. He's had an influence on the law. He probably was a bit of a more textualist than I was. He said that I was a bloodthirsty originalist and that he was not. I don't know what that means, but I like the sound of it. And then he said to me once, oh God, I miss that guy. He said, Clarence, I walked in the conference and said, Clarence, you're solipsistic. I said, Nino, I don't know what that means, but I like the way it sounds. Or he said, he would say funny things. He would. There was an opinion that he thought was a bit of a dog opinion. He was talking to the chief about it, and I walked in. He said, "Oh, give it to Clarence. He has nothing to lose." But he was more than. He didn't influence me on my jurisprudence as much as he was just a wonderful friend that I trusted to work with. We would disagree. He referred to one of my Fourth Amendment opinions as what did he say? It was a liberty-destroying cocktail. And so we were out to lunch with the clerks one day, and he was having trouble figuring out what to drink. And so I said, Nino, you should get you one of those liberty-destroying cocktails. He immediately said, oh, that wasn't me, Clarence. That wasn't me. It was, and the law clerks are sitting there. There's one of these DNA is on it. It's like fingerprints are all over it. he dropped his ID on it, and he's claiming it's somebody else. A liberty-destroying cocktail. I thought that was a great line. No, but I loved working with him. I loved working with that court. That court that was together 11 years is my favorite. It was a wonderful time. But as far as my jurisprudence, I take ownership of that and all the blame and everything else. No one else is responsible. It's me.
Our final question comes from Sergio Nunez, also with our College of Education. And this, again, is going to be touching on some of the themes that you touched on in your formal address. As public trust in government continues to decline across multiple institutions, including the courts, many Americans now see the loss of confidence as a hill the government must climb to restore credibility. Why do you think public trust has eroded? Which concerns do you think are legitimate? And how do you suggest that we as a people could rebuild confidence in government, including the judiciary?
Oh, I think by learning more about it, by understanding it, and by not being controlled by people who have an interest in constantly pounding away because they don't agree or they want something else. It's like they're throwing temper tantrums. I think that unless people, and I meant what I said, I do not. It took the speech even. It takes a lot of work for me because I want to say what I actually think. And I think if we don't stand up and take ownership of our country and take responsible for it, we are slowly letting others control how we think and what we think. I think the beauty of going to school is that you learn how to think for yourselves. You develop the discipline to think things through. If you think it's losing confidence, then you get up and you participate. You don't sit on the sidelines. You think that the state is being run and inconsistent with how you feel, then you get up and you participate. You prepare yourself. If you think that the medical profession is not right, well, you become a doctor or be a medical person, and you deal with that. I think we need to take ownership of our country. It's our country. It is not on automatic pilot. People know more about how to program their cell phone than they know about their participating in their government. They read more. I don't know who reads all these notices when you have to update your stuff, but they probably do. I mean, the Constitution is that thick. You could sit down over a cup of coffee and read the entire thing. How many people have read it? How many people know why those provisions are there? I mean, I think each of us, this again, try to make the point, is government by consent. That means we take ownership. It's our consent. And it's our country. And the only way, I was asking a student at lunch today, and I'll repeat it. If you let someone use your car and you never check on it, whether they changed the oil, they had it serviced, you just let them take it to East Texas and use it. And you get it back. What condition do you think it would be in? It wouldn't look that, and that's what we're doing to our country. And if you want to think of people, how much they protect their cell phones. Why don't we protect our country that way? It's ours. And if you want it to have trust, if correct what you think is wrong, then get up and do it. Learn more about it. I was at a group of high school students visited me some years ago, probably 30 years ago. It's hard to say that. I'm hanging around a long time. But 30 years ago, and the teacher in front of the students said, "How many members of the court are there?" Well, she had a brochure in her hand that had 9 members. I mean, how hard is it to count to 9? So I think it's our country. We should take ownership of it, learn more about it, participate. If you don't like the way it runs, you run. If you don't like the way something is done, you get in there and you do it the way you think it ought to be done. Or if you think that you want to check to see whether trust is declining, you go and do it yourself. Don't listen to the networks or somebody on social media. Go check for yourselves. So I think, again, I repeat what I said there. It's our country. It's governed by our consent. let us act like that and take ownership of it.
Well, Your Honor, you have blessed us greatly here with your wisdom, your candor, your patriotism, and some of these closing exhortations. So everyone, please join me in one more big show of Texas gratitude. So, thank you. So.